Okay, so then let's look at if we have a difference of squares. And so again, the squares means perfect square. So the first term and the second term are what we call perfect squares. And the second term is being subtracted from the first term. So that's important too. Okay, if you have something like x squared plus 25, that is not a perfect square. Okay, you need two perfect squares and a subtraction sign. So when we look at this one, x squared minus 25. 1 is a perfect square, 25 is a perfect square. That's good. We have a subtraction, so we're good to go. So when we factor this out, we end up with x squared minus 5 squared. Okay, and when we factor that into two brackets, we'll have an x plus 5 and an x minus 5. And this is how it always goes. So you always have a something, so x, and the x will have whatever the square root of the perfect square is. So in this case, the square root of 1 is 1, and the square root of 25 is 5. Okay, so you have x plus 5, x minus 5. And when you factor that out, when you expand it, you'll notice that we get a middle term of 0. Okay, and that's why we don't see any bx in there. Okay, so as long as your bx cancels out, so bx cancels out. And we can see this if we expand it, we'll get x squared plus 5x minus 5x minus 25. And we end up with x squared minus 25. And we got that from rainbowing this. Okay, so let's try an example here. So 25x squared minus 64. 25 is a perfect square, 64 is a perfect square, and we have our subtraction. So I can assume that this is a difference of squares. So the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of 64 is 8. Okay, so I'm going to do f of x equals, so I'm going to have my 5x terms, because that's attached to my x, and then I need one positive and one minus. Square root of 64 is 8. And to find the roots, just like we've been doing the whole time, 5x plus 8 equals 0, 5x minus 8 equals 0, 5x equals negative 8, and x equals negative 8 over 5. And here, 5x equals 8, and x equals 8 over 5. Okay, so your two roots would be x equals negative 1.6 and x equals 1.6. And again, if you factored this out, if you rainbowed the whole thing, you'd notice that you would end up with a positive 40x and a minus 40x, so your bx would cancel out. Okay, so then let's look here. So if I look at this, 27 is not a square root, and neither is 48, but it looks like it should be a difference of squares. So I have to go back to my default of my GCF. What can I take out of both of these things? And I can end up factoring out 3. So then I get a f of x equals 3 9x squared minus 16. Now, are 9 and 16 perfect squares? Yes, they are. Do I have a difference, a subtraction? Yes. So now I can make this a difference of perfect squares. So I end up with f of x equals, I keep my 3. Okay, that just keeps coming down with me. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is 4. So I have my 3x and my 3x. Remember that I need one positive and one negative, and then I fill in the square root of my second term. And my roots would be x equals negative 4 over 3 and positive 4 over 3. And here's your practice in the worksheet. Section 7.5, part 3. Okay, so I want you to do this review solve by factoring. And I'm going to pause the video, I'm going to solve it all, and then come back and check to see if you've done it correctly, okay? You can follow along in the video if you'd like, but try doing it by yourself. And remember, so see if you have a GCF, and then see what kind of what kind of trinomial it is, okay? Okay, and so here you can see my solution. So you can also check the copy of the key of the notes online if you need to check it. Okay, so let's draw a line here to show where I've split it because there wasn't a lot of room. Okay, and then we will go on to the last section of the notes. Now this section is generally students' favorite section of quadratics because it's just a formula that we use, so the quadratic formula. And you can use it to find the roots of any quadratic equation, even if the equation is not factorable. Now on the test, often I will ask you to, solve by factoring. But if you want to check your answers, you could always check with the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula is this: x squared equals negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And please don't memorize this. You'll be given this on any test, okay? But you need to be written in standard form. Okay, so you need your ax squared, bx, and c in order to plot it into this formula. So for the formula, you get values of x. And you'll see that here you have a plus minus. Okay, so it moved again. But that means you'll do one adding and one subtracting. And then you'll get two values for your roots. Okay, the radicand in the formula simplifies to a perfect square. Okay, so a perfect square would be something like 25. And the radicand is just anything under this square root sign. So if what you get under there is a perfect square, then you can just solve it by factoring. You don't need to use the quadratic formula. But if it simplifies to a negative number, you will get an error message on your calculator because you cannot take the square root of a negative number. Okay, so if you get that, then there's no real solution to the equation, which means there's no roots. Okay, so let's solve this equation. And the first thing that we should do is, hopefully everyone said get into standard form. Okay, so we'll have 4x squared plus 84x minus 145. Will equal 0. Okay, so here's my a term, my b term, and my c term. And I'd see if I can factor anything out, but I can't. And again, I'll write this over here. A is 4, b is 84, and c is negative 145. And on a test or on your worksheets, I would suggest writing these three things out. Then it's really easy to just plot it into your quadratic formula. So then we just plug it into the quadratic formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And then plug in your values. So equals negative 84 plus or minus 84 squared minus 4 times 4 times negative 145. Be very careful with your signs in here. All over 2 times 4. Okay, so do your calculations, and I'm just going to pause the video, write it out, and we can come back together for the solution. Now when you get to this point here, where you have a value for everything, but you still have your plus and minus, this is where we separate it out into two equations. Okay, so you'll end up having x equals negative 84 plus 96.8 over 8, and x equals negative 84 minus 96.8 over 8. And then you'll get your two values of x. So x will be 1.6, and x will equal negative 22.6. And you'll see from the solutions that it's a good thing we didn't factor this, because that would have been difficult to factor. Okay, so I want you to try, okay, well, we'll do number 2 together, and then I'm going to get you to do number 3 by yourself and check back for the solution. So again, we look, is it in standard form? It is, so we're good to go here. My A equals 12, B equals negative 47, and C equals 45. So again, I fill it out into my equation. Square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So again, be careful with your signs. So we have negative b. My b is negative. So I have to put negative and a negative. So it'll end up being positive. Plus or minus negative 47 squared. And negative number squared becomes positive. Minus 4 times 12 times 45. And that's all over 2 times 12. And I'll end up getting positive 47 plus or minus 49 over 24. Now 49 is a perfect square. Okay, so when I do that, I end up with 47 plus or minus 7 over 24. Okay, and when I do x equals 47 plus 7 over 24, and x equals 47 minus 7 over 24, I get that x equals 2.25 and x equals 1.7. Okay, so try the third one and then come back and I'll have written out the solution. Okay, so the first thing you should see is for example 3 that is not in standard form. Okay, so hopefully you got it into standard form. You can check it for a GCF. There is none, it's only 1. So I've written out my ABC terms over here. I filled it into my equation. Okay, then you get your two terms here. So here's your plus term, and here's your minus term, and then you get your 2 roots. Okay, x equals 0.55, x equals negative 4.55. Again, I know I scrolled through that fast. You can check the key of the notes online, okay, and or you can just pause the video and check at certain points. Now, if we look at the last one, again, try this on your own. But what happens is you'll see, are we in standard form? We are. We're using P, but it doesn't matter. It's still in standard form. So I write down my ABC values over here, and I plug them into my quadratic formula. Now what happens is I get down to this point here. So 123 plus or minus the square root of negative 2271. Now we cannot have, so if we have a negative radicand, anyone remember what this means? Remembers that, or it means that there are no real solutions. Okay, so this parabola would not cross the x-axis, okay, because again, try it on your calculator. Try putting a negative in a square root, like the square root of negative 3 or the square root of negative 9, and you'll get an error that does not exist. Okay, so if you want to practice this, you can do questions 1 and 2 to 4 on page 427. And note that for question 4, the answers in the back may show a solution that has been simplified in a different way. Okay, if you calculate your answer to a decimal, you can see that you'll get the same answer in the back of the book. Okay, so I'm going to post one last video, just on a really short video on things I think that you should be studying or you should be comfortable with for the test. Again, don't forget to download the bonus quiz. Okay, so it will be up from Thursday to Saturday. Download it, print it off, fill it out, and then hand it in on Tuesday. Whatever you get on that will be bonus marks. Your test is on Tuesday. I'm going to be posting the marks up later, so check it for any NHIs. There are a lot of NHIs, which again means not handed in, so there are lots of really really sad grades right now, but once you hand in those grades, they're all going to pop right back up, okay? So please make sure you hand in those 5 worksheets that are due. Write down anything that's not handed in, and then if you think you handed it in, then come check. Or if you have it, then hand it in. And if you don't have it, print it off, get it done, and hand it in, because I really want everyone to get the best mark they can get, okay?